There was something about Chateau Bow Wow that made me uncomfortable from the moment I saw it. Sitting alone on the top of a hill, it inspired a feeling of desolation. Of course, the bumpy ride up the long, winding country road that led to it inspired a feeling of upset tummy, but that's another story. "Where are we?" I asked in a hushed whisper. I had never seen this part of town before. "No man's land," Chester growled reassuringly from the bottom of his box. A second low rumble of thunder resounded in the distance, and then as we pulled into the driveway, I became aware of another sound. "Do you hear all that barking?" I asked Chester. A chill went through me. Together we listened for a moment. Then Chester spoke. "No doubt the victims of some fiendish laboratory experiment," he said. I gulped. "Well, this is the place," Mr. Monroe called back cheerily from the front seat as he brought the car to a halt. "You two stay put. We'll be right back." And all the Monroes went off through a door marked office to do whatever it is people do in offices. Not to mince words, I was petrified. Where were the Monroes leaving us anyway? Boy, I thought, you trust some people, you give them the best years of your life, and what does it get you? Abandonment and despair. A fine kettle of fish, that's what I had to say. I looked around after a moment. The place didn't seem quite so bad close up. I suppose it was the sign that helped most. It was on the gate of a wall behind the house, and when I saw it, I began to feel better. It read, "Chateau Bow Wow, a special boarding house for special cats and dogs." "Oh, look, Chester," I said to the box sitting beside me. "There's a sign on the gate over there. You know what it says?" "I give up," Chester replied. "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." I squinted my eyes to see if I could make out any fine print. "No," I answered after looking carefully, "but it says we're special." "Umph," Chester grunted. "And here's something you'll appreciate," I added, hoping this might cheer him up a little. "It also says cats and dogs. You see, this place is for cats, too. And the sign even puts cats first. Isn't that nice, Chester?" Chester raised his head to a window level and looked out at the sign. He didn't change his grumpy expression a bit as he said to me, "They probably did it alphabetically," and he dropped out of sight again. Just then the front door of the office opened and Toby came running out. "Here they are," he called to a strange-looking chap who loped along slowly behind him. This fellow, whoever he was older than Toby and Pete, but not as old as Mr. and Mrs. Monroe. Having seen some of Mr. Monroe's college students when they'd come to the house to beg for mercy, I'd estimated that this new chap was roughly their age. He had a shag of brown hair that kept falling into his eyes and a t-shirt that spilled out over the top of his pants. His sneakers were untied, and as he was coming toward us, he stepped on one of the laces and almost fell on his face. Toby opened Chester's carrier and pulled the reluctant cat out. Chester hung from Toby's arms like Spanish moss, and wore an expression that would have soured milk chocolate. "This is Chester," Toby said by way of introduction. "Chester, this is Harrison." Chester turned to me with a smirk. "Well, what am I supposed to do now?" he asked. "Curtsy?" Harrison, I thought. What a weird name for a person. "Hey there, kitty," Harrison said, instantly not endearing himself to Chester. "And this," Toby went on, "is Harold." "Wow," Harrison said. "What a weird name for a dog." I looked at Harrison. Harrison looked at me. I thought to myself, this Harrison fellow really has a knack for putting the wrong foot forward. "Well," Harrison said, "you guys are the last of the arrivals for this week. Now we got a full house." The door to the office popped open, and a girl with red hair and a lot of freckles stuck her head out. She seemed to be about the same age as Harrison, but she looked more tucked in. "Harrison," she called, "do you know where Chester's file is? Dr. Greenbrier wants to look at it while the Monroes are here. I can't find it anywhere." "But you were looking at it this morning, Jill," Harrison answered. I know," the girl named Jill said, shaking her head. "I just can't remember where I put it. I was hoping you'd seen it." Harrison shrugged his shoulders and smiled at Jill. "Wish I could help you out," he said, "but I don't pay much attention to the files. That's your territory." Jill sighed. "I don't know what's the matter with me lately. I'm so tired from all this work, I can't remember where I even put anything anymore." "I guess old age is setting in," Harrison said with a laugh. "Ha ha," Jill answered without one, and she went back inside, letting the door slam behind her. Chester gave me a look that said he was clearly unimpressed with the staff. The door opened a third time, and Dr. Greenbrier stepped outside with the rest of the Monroes. I became nervous at once. There's nothing like the sight of a white jacket with creepy little stains all over the front of it to get the old heart pumping. Dr. Greenbrier walked in our direction, his movement steady and unwavering. The light reflected strangely off his glasses, so that it was hard to see what was going on under his thick bushy eyebrows. When he spoke, his words came as slowly and evenly as his steps. "Hello, Chester. Hello, Harold," he said to both of us as if he were not sure which of us was which. Chester was apparently as delighted to see Dr. Greenbrier as I was, since his response to the doctor's hello was to begin hissing and shedding hair frantically all over Toby. Dr. Greenbrier just smiled. Now, Chester, what's the matter, You're not afraid, are you? I suppose his words should have been comforting, but I could feel myself beginning to shake. You're both going to have a wonderful time here at Chateau Bow Wow while your family's away, aren't they, Harrison? Harrison looked at Dr. Greenbrier as if he were crazy. The doctor turned back to us. Harrison and Jill are going to take good care of you. There's nothing to worry about. Mrs. Monroe seemed a little uneasy. Are you sure everything will be all right, Doctor? She asked. I don't mean to question you, but everything will be just fine, Mrs. Monroe, he answered her sharply. Surely you don't question my staff. Mrs. Monroe's eyes grew wide. No, of course not, she answered, taken aback. Harrison has worked for me for 3 summers now, and Jill is studying to be a veterinarian. I trust them both completely, as should you. But we thought you'd... Mr. Monroe started to speak, but was cut off by the doctor. Yes, I know, but I must simply take some time off. No one appreciates just how hard I work. His face took on a pained expression as he continued. This has been a difficult summer. I'll work myself into a collapse if I don't get away. With a furrowed brow, he looked into Mrs. Monroe's eyes. Then his features relaxed. Anyway, he went on, it isn't as if I were going to the other side of the world. I'll be right here in town, just a phone call away should any problems come up. I know you have 2 very special pets here, and believe me, nothing is going to happen to them. Harrison snorted. This is a special pet? He asked, pointing to Chester. Chester, who had calmed down a bit, began hissing at Harrison. Oh, yes, Dr. Greenbrier replied seriously. Chester is a very special cat, most unusual. Isn't that so, Mr. and Mrs. Monroe? Unusual, Mr. Monroe said, reflecting. I'd say that's just the word for Chester, wouldn't you, dear? That's the word, all right, Mrs. Monroe agreed. At that moment, Jill came through the gate marked Chateau Bow Wow. She tripped on a tree stump as she moved toward us. Chester dropped his head sadly. I heard him sigh. I assumed in resignation to his fate. Okay, their bungalows are all ready, she said as she approached. She took Chester from Toby and carried him off. He didn't even resist as they disappeared into the world beyond the gate. Bungalows are what we call cages here at Chateau Bow Wow, Dr. Greenbrier was saying to the Monroes. We think it has more class. Oh, yes, Mrs. Monroe answered. Class, yes. She and Mr. Monroe exchanged a look. Well, we should be going, Mr. Monroe said. Come on, boys, let's leave Harold to his new home. Suddenly, Toby threw himself around my neck. Goodbye, Harold, he cried. I'm going to miss you. Be a good dog, okay? I felt a tear come into my eye. Pete snickered. Yeah, Harold, he said sarcastically. Try not to stink up the joint. I felt a bite coming to my teeth. Bye, Harold, Mr. Monroe said, leaning down to pat me on the head. Remember, he added in a whisper, it's good for the soul. Harold, Mrs. Monroe said firmly, be of good cheer, and keep your eye on Chester, will you? Try to keep him out of trouble. Mrs. Monroe often left me with instructions, but rarely so impossible a task as that. Still, I vowed inside myself to do my best. Toby was holding me tightly. His tears flowed freely now. I don't want to leave Harold, Mom, he was saying between sniffs. A lump formed in my throat. Gently, Mrs. Monroe separated Toby from my neck. As she led him by the hand to the car, Harrison took me by the collar to the waiting gate. Just as I was about to enter, I looked back at Toby, who was waving to me sadly. A tear at last escaped my eye, and I turned to step through the gate. Harrison pulled the door shut, and Chester's words popped into my head. Abandon all hope, he had said, ye who enter here. Once inside the gate, I got my first real look at my new home, as Mr. Monroe had called it. Chateau Bow Wow consisted of 9 bungalows. Whatever they were called, they looked like cages to me. These stood on 3 sides of a big grassy play area, which Harrison referred to as the compound. The 4th side of the compound was the back wall of the house. A door in this wall led directly into Dr. Greenbrier's office. This door and the main gate seemed to be the only ways to get in or out of the place. A high wooden fence stood behind all the bungalows. It was impossible to see over it, and the only relief from the drabness within was the presence of a few trees here and there. Oh well, I thought, I'd been right about one thing, the Waldorf Astoria it wasn't. Harrison led me to the first bungalow we came to after entering the compound. I was relieved to see that Chester was being housed next door. After Harrison left me, I whispered to Chester through the wall. What's it like where you are? I asked. This isn't so bad. I got a nice carpet on the floor, a couple of rubber bones for chewing. It's not home, but at least they try to give it a personal touch. Oh really? Chester snapped back. Like what? Aside from a disgusting-looking lump of cloth hanging from a string in here, there isn't much in the way of interior decoration. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Chester. Looks as if it's been hanging here since they built the place, he went on. Probably supposed to be some sort of cat plaything. To tell you the truth, it looks like a mouse with a serious medical condition. I'm sorry, I said again. Probably got that way from eating the food here, he muttered. "Oh, this is nice," I said, noticing my food dish for the first time. "It says Doggy's Din Din on the side. Does your dinner ball say anything?" There was a long silence from the other side of the wall. "Chester? Chester?" "I hear you, Harold." "Does your food dish say anything?" "Yes, Harold, it says, Tuna tonight, Kitty's delight." "Oh, that's cute, Chester, don't you think so?" "I may throw up." "Pardon?" "Never mind, Harold." After a pause, Chester spoke again. "Harold?" "Yes, Chester?" "This place is a loony bin, Harold. Any place that has a dead mouse hanging on a string as guest room decor is a loony bin." "Oh, Chester, I think you're exaggerating," I started to say, but I was cut off by a sudden burst of barking from the two dogs in the bungalows directly across from ours. Straight ahead of me was a bulldog in a white turtleneck sweater. Next to him was a French poodle. They seemed to be in the middle of an argument, and it was the poodle who spoke first. "Oh, yes, yes," she was saying. "Over and over you say the same thing, but don't think I'm so easily fooled, Monsieur Max. You cannot pull the, how you say, wool over these eyes so easily." "Louise, lower your voice," the bulldog replied. "Everyone can hear you." "Let them. I do not care. Why should I, after what you've done to me? Humph." Even at a distance, I could see that Max was embarrassed. He tried to pull his head further back into the turtleneck sweater, which had already threatened to engulf him. He kept pacing back and forth as he spoke. "So," Louise pressed on relentlessly, "what do you have to say for yourself, Monsieur Fancy Pants?" "I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill, that's what I have to say," Max responded. "You're making a little hello into—" "A little hello," Louise shot back. "This kind of little hello, as you call it, I will make into a big au revoir. That's what I will do with this little hello." "Louise," a soft, breathy voice interjected. I strained my head to see where it was coming from. The speaker was in a bungalow off to my right, but I couldn't see inside. "Oh, no," Louise exploded. "This is too— oh, what is the word? Oh, yes, much. Now she wants to speak." "Now, Louise," Max said, his anger building. "She has just as much right to speak as you do." "Yes, yes, defend her, why don't you?" "Louise, I don't need defending," said the feathery voice. I noticed the speaker had a slight southern accent. "I've done nothing wrong." "Max is mine, do you hear me, Scarlett?" Louise fairly ranted across the empty space. "Georgette," the voice responded gently. "What?" Louise shrieked. "My name is Georgette," Georgette replied. "Scarlett, Georgette, it's all the same to me. You may want him, but he's mine. Do you hear me? Mine." "Louise," Max bellowed in a full, rich voice. "Enough! I've had of your wild accusations, now let it be." There was the sound of a crash, and Louise vanished to the back of her bungalow. Max looked out sullenly into the distance. "Oh dear," Chester said dryly next door. "I do believe Louise has thrown her din-din dish against the wall." And then he let out a screech. "What is it, Chester?" I cried. "What's wrong?" Something landed on my door. I don't know what." "You've got to help me," a new voice hissed eerily. There was the sound of wire rattling. "I can't take it any more." "Chester, is that you?" I whispered. "Is this some kind of joke?" Suddenly a head appeared upside down over the edge of my bungalow. I jumped and hit my own head on the ceiling. That must have jarred my visitor, for he flopped to the ground before my door. "You're new here, aren't you, Buster?" he snarled. Yes I am," I replied, trying to size up the vision before me. He was a cat, that much was clear, but a cat unlike any I'd ever seen. He looked like a walking, talking patchwork quilt. He glanced furtively over his shoulder before he spoke again, and then it was in a low, intense whisper. "Tuesday," he uttered. "Over the wall. Don't tell the others, just you and me." "Just you and me," I repeated. I didn't have a clue as to what he was talking about. "Shh," he said quickly. "Not so loud. We'll get out of here, pal. Don't worry about it." "Oh, I'm not," I answered. "At least I think I'm not." "Okay, just keep cool." Again he looked around him. "Watch out!" he snapped all at once. "It's them!" And he was gone. I cast my eyes in the direction he'd been looking and saw Harrison and Jill coming with our dinners. "Oh no," Jill was saying. "Will you look at that? Lyle's gotten out again. He's a regular terror. Come on, Lyle, let's go now. Come on, be a nice kitty." Lyle swept by my bungalow, flattening himself against it as if trying to escape a searchlight. I could see he was the very same cat who had been talking with me. Harrison scooped down on him suddenly and had him back in his bungalow a few seconds later. I heard Lyle muttering under his breath all the way. "You know," Jill said to Harrison as he returned to passing out our dinners, "we're going to have to do something about that cat. He gets out of his cage all the—" "Bungalow?" Harrison mumbled irritably. "Right," she said. "I stand corrected. Oh, by the way, I found Chester's file. It was under your stack of comic books." "Oh?" Harrison looked up from Max's bungalow, a puzzled look on his face. "I wonder how it got there." "That's what I wondered," Jill said. "Why do you read those things anyway?" "Comic books?" Harrison shrugged. "It's something to do," he said simply. Jill stopped where she was and regarded Harrison. Shaking her head, she said, What are you going to do, Harrison? Read comic books all your life? Don't you want to be something? You mean go to college like you? He asked. No thanks, I don't have the time. I want to retire at 21. All I have to do first is make $1,000,000. Oh, is that all? Jill replied. And how will you do that, if I may ask? That is what I haven't figured out yet, but don't worry, I will. I'm thinking all the time. I'll bet you are, Jill said. I'll just bet you are. Oh, I am. There was a growl of thunder. We better hurry, Harrison said. It may start raining. Quickly, they finished dishing out our food and started toward the door. Jill turned back. Okay, everyone, she called out. Enjoy your dinners. I'll check in on you later. I stared down at the fare that had been set before me and wondered what Chester had been so worried about. After all, any place that would put a sprig of parsley on top of a bowl of dog food couldn't be all that bad. Mold and rainwater indeed. I dug in. It was much later in the night when we first heard it. Jill had already checked in on us as promised, and now the sounds of snoring and deep breathing convinced me that most of the guests at Chateau Bow Wow were already fast asleep. I was thinking about what a strange bunch they were. Max, Louise, Georgette, Lyle, Dr. Greenbrier, and Harrison and Jill. Who would I meet tomorrow? I wondered. I was about to ask Chester what he thought when... Ooh! I sat bolt upright, a violent chill racing down my spine. Chester, I cried out, did you hear? Oh! It went again. It was a howl, of that I was sure. But a howl so terrible, it was unlike the howl of any dog I'd ever heard. Apparently Chester felt the same way. Werewolves! I heard him utter from his bungalow next door. Oh, come on, Chester, I said. You're letting your imagination run wild. Werewolves! He exclaimed again as the howls reverberated through the night air, alternating with the thunder, which was growing in loudness and intensity. Beware! Chester hissed at me. Oh! Went the cry in the night. There was a sudden silence. Exhausted but unable to sleep, we sat, side by side, staring into the blackness before us. I held my breath in anticipation of the next sound I would hear. As it turned out, it was Chester. The Chateau Bow Wow, my foot, he uttered in a deep, throaty voice. Welcome to Howliday Inn.